Hello, my name is Laurel Collins and welcome to Are You Voting for Change on Shaw TV. I'm here with my guest today, Fernando Garci-Crespo, who is the volunteer coordinator in Greater Vancouver for Fair Vote Canada, as well as James Coccola, the Executive Vice President for the BCGEU. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having us here.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to ask you, Fernando, you've been working with Fair Vote Canada. Yep. What really is the importance of proportional representation when it comes to the representation of marginalized communities?
Yeah, so for me, I started working on this issue because I come from Mexico. I'm an immigrant from Mexico, and I saw in my own country how certain communities, indigenous communities, specifically people of color, people with lower incomes, were less represented in the legislature in our Mexican democracy than here. And when I came here, I often just thought, okay, the country is developed, it runs itself, I don't need to be involved, everything works out. And then I suddenly realized and looked at the legislature when I went in for the first time with my grade 11 social studies class. And then I saw that it was overwhelmingly white, and it was overwhelmingly old, and it was those groups, those same indigenous groups that were underrepresented in Mexico, in a developing country, they were also underrepresented here. And then I asked the question, why? And it's because we have a system that gives the most power to the status quo, and it doesn't have representation of the other groups. So proportional representation doesn't only mean that 40% of the votes will go to 40% of the votes go to a party, 40% of the seats will go to that party. But it would also mean that most likely the share of the votes held by women, held by young people, held by people with special needs, by the LGBTQ will increase, because those votes of those people who are drowned by votes from the dominant segments of that electoral district will still count for something in the long run. So we see places like New Zealand, we have Chloe Swarbrick, who's an amazing MP there, a Green MP, who's young and who's energetic and who won her seat because she got enough young people to follow her. The same way in Australia, another senator being in a wheelchair and arriving to the Senate and changing how the whole Senate works because they made space for him, and that doesn't happen in our current system.
Yeah, so you're talking a little bit about young people also being represented in politics. When it comes to organizing young people, how does proportional representation connect to their values?
I would say at the start of it, I saw a lot of disengagement because it was politics. And young people don't like politics. I like politics, but most of them don't. And for me, it was really important to tell them, this proportional system is going to give you a reason to vote. You know, when young people, you tell them your vote is actually going to count. You can vote for the Green Party, the NDP, the Liberals, in any riding in the province you want and get your vote counted. People feel much more likely to show up to vote. And then young people feel much more engaged and feel much more willing to show up and volunteer and vote and get engaged, because they see candidates that don't only push for the values that they want, climate change, for climate action and things like that, and getting elected under a proportional system, but they also see people that look like themselves. They see students, they see young activists, they see young people from minority origins getting elected and representing them in the legislature, which really it's about us representing ourselves, and we see that as a possibility under proportional representation.
Thanks. James, your union, BCGEU, is part of this campaign. How many members do you have, and really what does your campaign look like?
Great question. So the BCGEU, the BC Government and Service Employees Union, represents over 77,000 members in nearly every sector of the economy and in every region of the province. And so we've been working for months now, both to our membership and to the broader public, trying to bring the message about why PR is good for working people. And so this has looked like a couple of things. We've brought in the very talented Dennis Pilon to do a webinar with our members to talk about why PR is important and try to dispel some of the myths. But we've also been working to do broader public videos. So we've sponsored videos through social media with a really simple message that voters should get what they ask for. Because we know that PR, when you get 40% of the vote, you get 40% of the seats. And so we're really working on the message in the interior, where at the moment, many people don't have the representatives that they voted for. And we're going to be also sharing the message on the island in places where people may have voted other than their current representative. Really think that this is an important thing for labor unions to be doing, to engaging their membership, showing that they have a stake in the public debate around how we vote. And I'm very proud that the BCGEU is doing this as an advertising sponsor. It's one of the few unions that is doing this publicly. We have also been very active. You may have heard about a lawsuit that the Independent Contractors and Business Association put forward, trying to stop the democratic right of people to have a vote on their voting system. And the BCGEU is an intervener in that case, and we're working vigorously with the lawyers from the government side to make sure that the referendum does go forward and the votes are counted and the people can have their say in how their decisions or how their MLAs are elected.
You said one of those kind of messaging pieces around how proportional representation would benefit working people. Can you tell me a little bit more about how it would?
And again, a really great question, and it's kind of like 3 solid reasons why working people should be interested in proportional representation. You know, first off, you get accountable representation. So people who are elected under a PR system, they can't just say whatever they want to get votes. And then when it comes to voting time under a current system, you know, we're often faced with a choice. Do I vote for the person who didn't necessarily do what they say last time, or do I let the people that I don't like get in? Under a PR system, if you say something and you don't do it, then voters have the ability to, you know, hold you to account for it. So working people get more accountable representation. It also means that they get representatives that reflect their values close to them. So if you're a progressive voter in Fort St. John, you may have never had somebody who reflected your values, ever. But under a first-past-the-post system, you may have somebody who's close by. And the same thing goes for the island. You may not have had somebody who reflected your opinion for a very long time. And under proportional representation, you'll get a representative that reflects your values. But third and most important for working people is that when we look at the countries that have the best pensions, the best benefits, the most vacation time, the best conditions for working people, it's under a proportional representation system. And that's because those voters have the power. Under first-past-the-post system, the power is given to moneyed interests, to big organizations, and we want to see the power go back into the hands of working people and people who have the most to benefit from a democracy that reflects them.
What can I get you?
I'm gonna take another cool one.
And I'll have a Caesar, please.
Can I get a margarita?
I think I'm going to have a tequila sunrise.
Oh yeah, that sounds good actually. Yeah, I'll get one of those.
No!
Yeah, when we're talking about who has the most to benefit, I've heard a lot that really young people are going to benefit a lot from proportional representation. Do you want to tell me, you talked a little bit about the initial disengagement or cynicism around politics from young people. Do you want to tell me a little bit about how the engagement process has been going and why it's really important for youth to get engaged right now?
Well, I would say that the ProRep for BC, the official proponent, has done a very good job at trying to engage young people and people in colleges. I go to UBC and I see flyers now standing everywhere, and I see street canvassers, and I see messagings like ProRep is lit, and it's good. It's good. It almost seems like a young person came up with it, and maybe it did. And so it's really a very interesting thing to see young people getting engaged and to see it following through the discourse of universities. I have certainly talked to everyone on my floor about voting for proportional representation, and it's really interesting to see how that furthers. And when you talk to them about how issues like climate change, like public debt, and like lower tuition rates, all of them relate directly to what voting system we use to elect our representatives, then they continue engaging. So I would say that it's ramping up, and I could see the possibility of having young people being really interested and having a higher turnout than normal, because at the end of the day, this is the system that we will use way after the people in the legislature right now are gone. And if some of us sit on the legislature, it will be under that system that our generation is elected. So I think it's paramount that we get engaged and that we continue doing what we have been doing so far and ramping it up, so young people vote, regardless of how they vote, but that they vote.
You know, when I'm talking to young women who are getting involved in politics, or you know, actually women in general, oftentimes the kind of combative nature of the political world can turn people off of any gender. And then similarly for young people, can you talk a little bit about proportional representation and how it might address some of those concerns?
Personally, I completely agree with that. Me, as a young person from a minority origin, I would never get into politics under the first past the post system, just because the attacks are visceral, the attacks are personal. It's one person wins per district, so it's literally like young person reference, the Hunger Games, and you rip each other's heads open until just one survives. And it really, that is the combative nature. It's a sword's length, the aisle. My class under Mark Neufeld, who ran for the legislature, and we went before he ran, when he was my grade 11 teacher, and we went to the legislature to see it. I was the last class he took, because the behavior there was so bad that it was worse than you could expect from high school students. I remember a guy texting, and then I don't remember if it was the NDP or Liberal, but he was texting on his cell phone while the other side was giving a speech. And then suddenly he realized that the speech was over, then he turned off his phone, he yelled boo, and then they started talking again, his own side, and then he picked up the phone and started texting again. And I'm like, I would get in so much trouble if I did that. And it's really about saying we just expect our politicians to be as civilized as university students. And believe me, university students were not very civilized, so it's just a bare minimum. And I think that's something that young people will feel engaged with, to say the way we solve our problems is not by yelling at each other, and the way we solve our problems and we become a better country or a better province is not by combative solutions. It's not by just representing the status quo. It's by saying we come together, we find the best solutions that we can all agree with, and we disagree on some, but we don't just text while the other person is speaking. And maybe that does happen with young people from time to time, but that's a stereotype. And but that doesn't mean it should happen in the legislature. You know, it definitely should not happen in our jobs. We would get fired. And they complain about millennials not knowing how to do their job all the time and always being on their cell phone. Well, the baby boomers in the legislature don't know how to stop using their cell phone. So, and doing the same things that they complain about us doing. So I would say we're a pretty good generation, and I think we will get out to vote.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your very powerful and inspiring words. Hi again, everyone. My name is Simca Marshall. I'm a geography student at Douglas College, a member of the Ahousaht First Nation, and I'm a young voter. Yeah. My message today is pretty simple, and it's a shout out to my peers. Young people, don't let older generations tell you that you don't vote. Because my generation doesn't have the luxury of being apathetic. We are graduating with thousands of dollars in debt, we're likely to be lifetime renters, and we're watching our earth and climate change dramatically. But we are also the generation of change. We're at the front lines of protests, we're giving countless volunteer hours to important causes, and most importantly, we are out here organizing. This fall, us young voters are going to make history by voting in a new electoral system that means fairness, representation, and accountability. I'm voting for ProRep because I'm tired of watching political parties promise change for young people and never deliver. And I'm especially tired of watching political parties win false majorities with less than 50% of the vote. That's not fair. That's not fair, it's not democratic, and it happens all the time with our current voting system first past the post. It happened in New Brunswick last month, where the party who earned the most votes didn't win the most seats. And a few weeks ago, it happened in Quebec. This is politics as usual, and it is outdated and it is unfair. Young people have shown that when we come out and vote, we can influence the outcome of an election. Just look at the federal election in 2015. Youth voter turnout surged by 24% in British Columbia alone, and our numbers only grew in the last provincial election.
When we're talking about more collaborative government, moving away from some of the combative, the BCGEU is trying to work with government often. Lobbying in first past the post versus proportional representation. How do you think that will go?
You know, that's a great question, and the real answer is we'll have to wait and see. But my hope is that organizations, whether they're unions or business, it becomes more difficult, because the power should be in the many, not the few that can afford to send somebody to Victoria to make sure they have a meeting with the minister. It should be that the people in the ridings who are making the votes or casting the ballots, they're the ones that make the decisions, not behind closed doors, not behind some smoke and mirror thing. So the answer is, don't know for sure, but I hope it's more difficult. I kind of think of it like banning big money. You know, unions conduct lobbying because if we didn't lobby for things, it would only be the moneyed interests, the big corporations, who would be the ones talking to politicians. You know, before they banned big money, we donated money to political parties, because if we didn't, it would just be the rich that could do it. Now that that's gone, we see that there's more of an emphasis on connecting with voters directly, because that's the only way parties can survive, and that's the way it should be, and it's the same with lobbying.
And in terms of, you're both working on separate campaigns for, for the same purpose, trying to get people out to vote in this referendum, trying to get people to vote yes to proportional representation. How are groups working together or apart?
So we're an official advertising sponsor, so we're not allowed to work with other groups. So we have to be very separate, and so our messaging and our advertising is not in collaboration with any other official groups. Every once in a while, we'll speak to other labor unions that aren't advertising sponsors, and they may, share a video or talk to the membership about some of the things that we're doing. But very much, it's separate from other groups.
And it's important so we can actually reach our niche and our groups and our communities, and it's all about this community sense. So I often think that campaigning, the way it many times is done and the way the no side is handling, is just one big fear campaign all over the province. And the way you combat that is with hope. And the way you put hope forward is locally. And the way you put hope forward is by your own members, your own people talking to you about why it is important. Me talking to young people, to the Latino community, to the immigrant community, and telling them why it is paramount that we vote for this. So it is, I would say, some people say, well, why don't you collaborate? It's a very first past the post thing to do, to everyone be in their own separate thing. And I'm like, but it is about this proper representation and us having the best possible contact to the people that we love, to our family, to our friends, to the people we work with, to the people we represent, and it's about that. So I am knocking on doors, talking to other students, and then he may be talking to his own members. But it's about that. It's about how we can talk to the ones we already have a connection with and say why we personally care about this issue so much.
And, you know, I really want to echo that. It's, you know, as an elected official yourself, you know that people need to feel an emotional attachment to an issue to really get buy-in on it. And so we're talking to working people about working class issues. Fernando's talking about issues for young people, and both of those are equally valid and equally important, because one message is not going to resonate with everybody. And we need to make sure that we're talking to people on about issues they care about in ways that works for them.
I want to say thank you so much to both of you. We are out of time, so thank you, James Coccola from the BCGEU and Fernando Garci-Crespo from Fair Vote Canada. Yeah. And thank you to our viewers. You have your ballots and your referendum guides. You've received them in the mail. Please make sure that you vote in this very important referendum. This is Are You Voting for Change? My name is Laurel Collins. Thanks for watching.